Have you heard about this personal and professional podcast?
Coaching in Session
with your host, Michael Rearden.
Jeaneen Tang, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to be talking about your work, speech, language pathology, and then also we're going to be talking about how you help parents with the endeavors of parenthood and raising children. And you do have a unique story, so I do want to get into that. Can you please tell us who you are and how you got into this work?
I've been doing this work for a speech language pathologist for 23 years now, so it's a very long time. And, people ask me, how did you get into this line of work, right? I have to go back and think about when did I have this desire to help people? And it goes back all the way to when I was about 8 years old. My grandfather was ill. He had lung cancer and he passed away. And I remember feeling very helpless. Like I wanted to be able to do more for him because, I loved him so much and he was such a great person, but I was only 8 years old. But it really sparked this desire to help people. And I thought maybe I wanted to be a teacher. And then in high school, I played sports and I thought, what about physical therapy? Because, that could have been somebody that could have helped my grandfather. And I knew I had to get a master's degree at the time. So I got my undergraduate degree in something else I love, which is English literature and a minor in creative writing. And when it came time to apply to physical therapy school, I wasn't exactly sure if I wanted to do it because it felt like everybody was going to apply. It was a very saturated profession at the time. And someone had mentioned, have you thought about speech therapy? Because I did some competitive speech in high school and college, and they thought, with the English language background, that might be something up my alley. And so, I had gone to school. I'm from Hawaii originally. I had finished my undergraduate degree in Oregon at Pacific University, and I found out that the University of Hawaii at Manoa had a speech therapy program. So I thought it'd be great because I can go home, I can go to grad school, and, come to find out there's a shortage of speech therapists, right? There's always a shortage of speech therapists. And the school district made a deal with our university and said, if you work for us after you graduate for 3 years, if you work for us, then we'll give you a stipend for school. And because I was in-state tuition, it was pretty much covering all of my graduate school, which was great because a lot of people get out of grad school and they're like, I have $100,000 in debt. And I was able to kind of leave grad school with very minimal debt, from undergraduate and everything. And so I worked in the school district in Hawaii and for 4 years actually. And then I decided I wanted to do acting. And so I moved from Hawaii to Los Angeles in 2005. And I worked in the schools here part-time for 4 years. And then, by that time it was, I worked in the hospitals as well with adults. And I was coming up to, being 35 around there. I started doing early intervention speech therapy after the schools. And I didn't know if I wanted to have kids or not. And my partner at the time, we decided, well, let's try. And we ended up getting pregnant. We had our son. He was lovely. He's a lovely little baby. Unfortunately, he had an accident. He fell off the bed and had a large brain bleed. And a few days later, he had a stroke. So he was left, disabled. He had, a large brain bleed on the left side of his brain, which is where the language center is. And that left side controls the right side of his body. So even today, he's 12 years old and he's not able to use his right arm or hand. He has seizures. He has disability with his balance and gait. He can't really climb and do things the way normal kids do. And, I went from being a therapist working with children with disabilities to being a parent with a child with a disability. So even though it's very unfortunate that he has a disability, it really helped me become a better therapist, because now I have a better understanding of what other parents go through. And I have better rapport and I have better empathy, and it makes me a better therapist. So, my son, they thought that he might never walk or talk, but he's great. He has a lot to still continue to progress with, but he is in 6th grade, and he's, doing grade level math with a lot of assistance, and he loves reading, and so I think that he, got speech therapy from me every day. He continues to get speech therapy from me every day. So it's really important, that early intervention, because he was 13 months old when he fell. And right away, we made sure that he got as much therapy as possible. So I know that, firsthand how much therapy can help a child with a disability, and how important it is for parents to be knowledgeable about how to get that therapy as well.
First off, thank you for sharing that story with us. And what I'm going to say is, I don't want you to think I'm belittling your experience. There are so many parents in very similar situations like yourself. And one of the things they always are looking for is help. They're looking for some direction, right? Because they'll go to doctors or go to these specialists, and it seems like a dead end sometimes. So to see a parent who was able to take something that would have been life-changing for them, because they could have thrown the towel. They could have just said, like, it's over, and, whatever happens, happens. But you were someone who was almost a steadfast warrior. Like, I'm going to be a parent. I'm going to do the best for my son. And that is an inspiring thing to be, because, parenting is, I say it's easy, but it's actually very difficult. It's challenging. It's so many ups and downs. It's like intervals. Like, you're going on the treadmill. You have these intervals that happen when you want them, and sometimes when you don't want them, because maybe you're ready. Like, okay, we have room, right? We're ready to have a kid, and you're so excited, right? But then you get the curveballs, and then the self-doubt kicks in, right? The limits, like, why me? Like, I did everything right. I went to school, and then it's almost like the blame game now. And it's not your fault. I'm talking to parents. Like, it's not your fault that something bad happens in your life. And I always say, like, the challenges that we get, they help invigorate us to overcome them. Because if we just had good in our life, we couldn't appreciate, that good. Right. So let's say everything was perfect in your life. Eventually it becomes numb to you. It's like, it's that homeostasis. So we essentially have to have some things that rock the boat every now and again. And some things are a bit more rocky than what we would envision and what we would like, essentially. But when we overcome those things, then we can help other people also who are in similar situations. And I find those are the best coaches, because they have already walked the walk. They know how to do it, right? It's like, I have done this, right? And then also the aspect of you are a parent, and then you can work with other parents, and then you can almost put yourself in their shoes. Of course, you can never put yourself in someone's shoes 100%, but just to be there, right? Because, like, when I work with coaches and things like that, I want someone who's been battered and bruised. I don't want someone who's in pristine armor. They have a lovely life. They live in a mansion. They have all these cars. They're, they haven't any hardships in their life. I want the person who has the hardships, right? And it sounds counterintuitive. Like, why would you want someone battered and bruised? It's because they understand what is truly there, right? Because there's meaning in life, and it's hard to see it when everything is just going your way, right? Because most people in our life, in our world today, they're on autopilot, and so they don't look at the things. And parents today, especially to children who are just kind of going off to school and daycare, and parents want to go work and travel the world, it's almost like a passive note. So that means essentially they want their kids to grow up so they don't have to worry about taking them to school and feeding them. And it's almost like it's a burden, but it's not. It's a blessing, right? Being a parent is a blessing. And, like, our conversation today is going to be getting into those minds of the parents and just understanding that, hey, your child is a child once, and eventually they're going to be an adult forever. So you need to take this time that you have with them and embrace it. Yes, you might have to miss some working hours. Yes, you might have to miss some alone time and private time and quiet time that you used to have, but now you get to have a kid jumping and screaming and yelling, and it seems so bad, like as I say it, but it's truly wonderful. And I can say that as a parent, like I would have never thought how amazing it was, even though I was a teacher, even though I work with kids all, for 15 years at this point, or actually over that, I would not know the joy that it is just to be a parent. And then also the aspect of what you would do for that child. You would give the shirt off your back, right? You would do anything for them. And just knowing this, we have to ask ourselves, why are so many parents today being passive about our child's education, passive about our child's brain health, about the foods we give them, everything? And that's my question to you. Why are parents kind of falling into this trap of being passive parents today?
Yeah, I think that, they can be passive, but also in the same sense, they're doing too much, in the sense that they might not be giving the best things for their kids, right? Maybe we're not feeding them the right foods, or maybe we're not looking at the best schools. But when it comes down to the overarching pattern of parents these days, I feel like there are way too many kids that need speech therapy because parents over anticipate what the child might need and are doing too much for the child. So the child isn't actually being able to interact naturally with their environment. They're not given that opportunity to complain like they're cold, or that they're hungry, or that they want a toy, because that toy has been already placed near them, or they've already been fed, or they've already been changed, and things are already done for them. So parents, it's almost easier for parents to just do things for the kids, rather than know what the child might need and then step back and observe and kind of let that natural interaction happen. So I think that, by doing too much and over anticipating, that's kind of where I see parenting happening, is in that kind of habit, and that whole pattern of doing too much. And yes, they might be doing too much, but also in your sense, they might be passively kind of having the routine of taking them to daycare or school, and then going to work and doing this and that, and doing this routine because it's easy, right? Routines are easy. We make them simple. But having to do the work is where it becomes difficult. Having to know what you need to do, but let that child be naturally able to experiment and explore and do all these kinds of things. That's where the hard work is. It's much harder to, what I say, play dumb and sabotage. It's harder to mindfully anticipate what a child needs and then, mindfully not act upon that and let the child engage with us naturally.
I agree with that, because we love to get things done quickly, especially like when you're in a rush, right? The kids have to be in school in 10 minutes because the kids didn't want to get up and get dressed and brush their teeth. And now you're out the door and you're like, oh my goodness, just get in the car, put their jacket on, put their shoes on for them. And they learn a dependence on mom and dad. And I just saw a video the other day. I don't know if it's a funny video or a sad video. And you can tell me if it's funny or sad. There was a kid who was let to order at a restaurant by himself. And this kid was like 11 or 12, maybe even 13, right? And he was like, I don't know how to order. So like, he was like, can I have some eggs and like French toast or pancake or whatever? And then the waitress asked, I don't know if this was fake, asked the kid, how would you like your eggs? And the kid looked at the parent, and it was like, color what you want. And then the kid goes, hatched. And then the waitress like, you want them fried, scrambled? And he's like, oh, okay, scrambled. So it's like they lean on parents so much today, and rightfully so, because what happened with that whole mindset situation is there was a group of children growing up and they had that independence, and the parents would kind of let them do all the things that they wanted to do, ride their bike in the neighborhood. And that's what truly made childhood, childhood at the time. But one of the things that the parents didn't do was tell their child that they love them, like just the words, I love you. And so what they did was they'll take them to Disney World, they'll do all of these things, and they thought their actions, the parents thought their actions was going to be enough for the child to understand that, hey, I love you because I'm doing these things for you. But then later on, what happened was perception kicked in, and they saw that the actions that they did was an obligation because they were the parent. So now what millennials did, and millennials do, I think 71% are more active in their child's lives because of what happened with them growing up. So they want to tell their kids that they love them. They don't want to give their kids the hard experiences, but that also is going to create a dependence. And that, as you know, is going to create some hardship later on in life for them if they don't know how to navigate these things. And also, there is something else millennials are doing because we are so busy. We are, these young entrepreneurs, and we want to retire early. But guess what we do? We get so busy that sometimes we say, we're going to delegate our child's upbringing and learning to an iPad, to a device, a phone per se, right? So now kids are being led to be distracted rather than to internalize and self-regulate their own emotions. So now we have an era or generation of kids growing up listening to iPads and videos, and that is their main source of communication, but it's not really communication, right? It's one-sided. So their speech and their diction. And I don't know if you've heard of the study, Peppa Pig. Peppa Pig is like a British cartoon. And there were so many kids watching Peppa Pig that the kids started to develop a British accent. And these parents are nowhere close to being British. So why are the kids developing this British accent? It's because they were learning so much of the diction from a device rather than from human interaction. And then parents today, how much do they speak in their house? Almost none. So unless they are going to be around grandparents, around other kids frequently, they're not going to get that in-person conversation, communication. And I wanted to get your take on that. Do you find that that is going to be an implication for children learning proper speech in their life?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of kids, especially during COVID, right? They were at home, all these little COVID babies, we call them, because they were born during COVID or they were very little during COVID. And they spent their time at home with these iPads or TVs or screens of any kind, right? And the parents are using them as babysitters, right? These devices as babysitters, and these kids just cannot get enough of it. They're just scrolling, they're just going through the iPad and the videos and all this stuff. And a lot of these kids are not, either they're not learning to speak, or they are picking up some kind of accent, or they're picking up, there's a lot of shows that are like non-verbal, but they're vocal. The animals will make these sounds. So there's no words in these shows, but these animals are making these like whatever these sounds are. So these kids are learning kind of like those sounds. But I love technology, right? And I think there is a great way to use it. Parents are able to sit with their kids and watch it with them and then comment about it and then generalize it throughout their day. I think that's really important. But just to leave a child, there's a limit to having a child sit there by themselves to watch a screen, right? You should really be there with them and talk about it, like, oh wow, that character did this, or we did that the other day, or oh, we can go to the park just like them. So you can comment about what's going on, but I don't think that technology was really, maybe it's made to be a babysitter, right? Some productions are like, this will entertain your child forever. But I don't think it should be utilized that way, because then the child learns that they can watch the screen, and then they get so upset when you try to take it away as well, So there is like this whole habit of watching the screen, and then they are not interacting with other people. They are not going to the park. So many kids don't go outside. A lot of these kids that go from screens, they go to gaming, they go to all this other stuff, and they just don't have that same social interaction. When I was little, I was a latchkey kid, and I would go and meet my friends in the neighborhood, and we would go and play outside until the sun went down. We would come home, and we would have dinner, and it was fine. That's what we did. We were outside and interacting, having fun, exploring. And, it's not as safe these days, right? So we're not going to let our kids just roam around. But has to be more than just screens. We can't have them do screens. I'm guilty of, we're on the airplane, please watch this, because it's going to be hours till we get someplace else. There are appropriate times to use screens, but for everyday use, I think there has to be a limit, and there has to be also the parent interaction with it as well.
Talked about that we can't let our kids go out because it's not the same. And let's use the word safe. Because me growing up also, I was able to go out, ride my bike around the block and things like that. I'll ask my great grandma, can I go to the park? And the park was it was pretty far for a kid, like 8-year-old to go to the park by themselves. And sometimes we did it without their, telling them it's the wrong thing to do. But, we still did it. So we ventured out, and we got away with a lot growing up. And today, it's not so much that, well, in my opinion, it's not so much that it's not safe. For example, I live in a very safe neighborhood, and we have some of the best police force in probably the whole entire country. They are adamant about protecting the community, and the neighbors or the residents of the neighborhood, they don't like to see kids by themselves, right? So if you have a kid that I believe is under 11 or around 11 or below, they can't be by themselves without a parent, right? Because then someone's going to call the cops, say there's this kid by themselves and I don't know where their parent is, or something along those lines, right? So now if that kid is, told on to the police are going to come out, do a welfare check. Why is the kid by themselves? Why are you home? And things like that. And then it's, of course, going to be maybe child neglect or something along those lines, right? So parents are almost fearful for themselves because they don't want to let their kids ride their bike around the corner to the park, where community today is very different than community in the past, I believe. We have become almost segregated in how we view our opinions versus how we view our community. Because the neighbor down the road might say, well, I don't want any kids, walking by themselves, right? Because I don't think it's safe. When the reality is we live in a very safe neighborhood. And it's almost astounding how, when we were growing up 8 years old, right? We'd go anywhere, right? And then the neighbor down the road will probably know who we were, know our parents, and it's like, don't worry, we got them. Versus today is like, well, I have my own views. And I think social media plays a big role in that, because now we have become almost internalized and, okay, I'm hanging around this crowd of people, and now you don't necessarily associate yourself with neighbors. And as a parent, I want you to ask yourself this question. Do you talk to any of your neighbors around you? Yes or no, right? It's an easy question. I know all my neighbors, right? I'm outside of my kid and I'm waving to them. I talk to them. We have no problems. If my kid ever went out, I'm almost certain my neighbors will probably say, hey, why is your kid out here? Take your kid back. You're not going to call the cops, right? But I can see many communities where there's going to be like, I'm going to call the cops because I don't know where this kid belongs, right? I'm just very active in my area, right? Everyone knows me. But then there's also things you can do where you can give your kid a note that's written. My kid is not lost. My kid is safe and loved. And if you have any problems, you can call this number. This is my cell phone. He's allowed to go to the corner store. He's allowed to go to the park. And they have to walk around this note. And it's like, whoa, like what kind of world are we living in? Because don't you think if a child is almost fearful to go out because almost at the persecution of their parents, wouldn't they want to stay inside? That's crazy.
Maybe. I live in Los Angeles, right? And it's not considered the safest place, right? I live in a condominium, and we have 14 units, and I probably know I'm probably the most social of the neighbors. Like I will say hi. And so I know like about half of them that live here by name. And, but, I don't know anybody who lives in the next building or the next house or whatever down the street. I don't know the names of my neighbors outside of my small building here. And, I don't have their phone numbers or whatever, but they see us and we'll say hi if we in passing. But yeah, I remember growing up, I would know a lot more neighbors. I would ride my bike and wave at, so-and-so down the street, and they would know, like, you live in that house over there. And you felt safe because that, I think I felt safe also because I knew that my neighbors were home and that they could also kind of keep an eye on me for a little bit, I wasn't scared to go out. But I think here, I would definitely not have my son walk down the street. He is disabled, so maybe if he wasn't, I'd feel a little bit more secure. But I think when he becomes like 14, I think I'll feel a little bit better about that. He's 12 now, but yeah, he's like Mr. Independent though. He's like, I can stay home by myself. I can do this and that. And that's a big leap for him developmentally, because I swear just like 6 months ago, he didn't want me to leave his side. He's like, you can't leave the house without me. But now he's like, oh yeah, you can go. I'm like, you want me to leave and go to the grocery store without you? He's like, yeah, just go. I'm like, okay. I'll leave. It's like 20 minutes. So it's like a really fast trip, but it's a big development for him. But I'm a little bit fearful, just of Los Angeles. You never know. You always find that these big cities are, we don't have a nice, safe neighborhood. It's like you have a really, really nice neighborhood, and then right next to it is like a really not great neighborhood, and they're just, blocks away from each other. So it kind of all blends together, and I feel like, at least in Los Angeles, it's not as safe. But maybe if we ever move back to Hawaii, I might feel a lot safer with him walking around the neighborhood because it's a lot more calm. And you do say hi to people. In Hawaii, everybody says hi. And over here, I feel like nobody even in my building, maybe a few people know my name, but I probably know their name before they know mine.
Choosing where you live is important because I used to live in Connecticut, and this is where I grew up. I grew up in Connecticut. I lived there 28 years, born and raised. And the people there, very unique, right? It's like they live in a little bubble, right? They want their own business, right? So for example, if you go to Starbucks in Connecticut and you're talking to your friend, you don't want anyone else in Connecticut to come into your conversation, your bubble, unless you already know them. Right. So if you're a stranger and you just overhear them saying something, you better not talk to them. Right. Because that's their bubble. And they feel like that with their neighborhood. Right. This is my block. This is my corner. This is my street. Right. This is my community. So that is why even, in Connecticut, they're more of, well, you're not my kid, but you are in my vicinity. So we had that growing up. I live in Texas now. And let me tell you, some of the kindest, sweetest people, whether you want to talk to them or not, they're going to come talk to you. So it's a very different community. I enjoy Texas more than I do Connecticut in the sense of how the community interacts with one another, where you could just be a complete stranger. It doesn't matter if you're on the person's block or on the person's street. Everyone's so friendly. They go out of the way to be friendly. And it was almost weird to me. When I came down from Connecticut and I moved to Texas, well, trying to talk to me. I'm like, why are you talking to me? I don't know you. So I had to get acclimated to that. Kids, when they go to school, it's like they get a similar dose of that bubble effect where they're in their classroom, right? So they have their same 25, 30 kids for their whole entire 8 years. Of course, you're going to get some students that come in middle of the school year. Some kids move away, so you lose a friend. There's going to be that. Of course, I had that growing up. But if we think about it, we essentially have 30 to 90 kids. We kind of rotate our whole entire childhood. What I love to do is I love to give my kids just like a diverse interaction with different types of kids, cultures, parents. And it's a lot. And I will say it's a lot because it's almost like an overload for him. He's like, I don't know where I need to be. because it's like, I got to be with this person. This is a different kind of person. This person loves me. This person's a little bit standoffish. So it's like they have to learn how to move, where it can be a bit tricky, but I understand that kids are extremely resilient. So this challenge for him, and it might seem like, oh, I should just kind of put him in daycare and give him the dirty kids so he can socialize with them. Yeah, sure, right? That's one way to parent. But I understand the world is so big, right? It's not just America. There's so many other places that he may need to go to or want to go to. And I don't want to not equip him with the tools necessary. And one of the things I want to get into a conversation with you is parent training, right? Because now we're looking at like, what do parents have to instill into their children? And it could be from different views, from your own experience. It could be from you working with other parents and just seeing what works. And of course, there's going to be a variety. I don't think there's one correct way to parent. For example, there's so many different parenting styles: helicopter parenting, tiger parenting, so like we can go down a list of parenting, but there are parenting skills that can make parenting a bit more pleasurable, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I love working with parents on how to teach and introduce language to their kids and how to practice language. Some of the important things too is like instilling structure into your child's day, because kids are chaotic sometimes and they actually crave structure, right? I know that you had referenced Tony Robbins in another podcast before, and one of the things he says is that people crave, predictability, right? They want spontaneity, but they also need predictability. They need to know that there is a constant and there is a structure to something. And when kids are chaotic, they really need that outside structure placed on them. So letting them know, like, hey, we're actually doing certain things throughout our day. We're not just flying through it and things are just happening to them. So at a very young age, I would tell my son, okay, we're going to go and we're going to get dressed, we're going to eat breakfast, and we're going to brush our teeth. And then as he got older, it's like, we're going to go to school, I'm going to pick you up, then we're going to go to the park. So I would keep it kind of in like these 3 little structured activities or sequences. So he would kind of know like what is going to happen. And so, even to this day, he'll be like, so what are we doing tomorrow, Mom? And then he wants to know exactly what the schedule is. And if I forget something, he goes, he'll remind me. So in his mind, he's like, well, you said we're going to do this, but we didn't do it. I was like, oh, okay, well, thanks for reminding me. Let's go do that now. So I think a lot of structure is important. And also, one of the big takeaways I hope parents get from my book is, I have a book called Play Dumb and Sabotage. And one of the big things is don't ask a yes/no question unless you're ready to honor that no. So a lot of parents, I'm sure you do it. I've done it in the past, where you ask a kid, can you do this? Or would you like to do this? Or are you ready to work? Are you ready to go to bed? Are you ready to brush your teeth? And then they say no. Are you going to say you're going to do it anyway? Right? So you have to really think about how you're asking questions, and you can avoid these no's, because if the child says no and you don't honor that, then you're going to lose their trust over time, because they said no, but you still want them to do it. Well, you're not honoring what they're saying, right? So I might ask a question. I say, well, what do you want to wear today? The red shirt or the blue shirt? And I'm also showing him like about shoulder width apart. You want to wear the red shirt today or the blue shirt? And whatever he's looking at, if he can't say the words, I might say, oh, the red shirt. Yeah, let's wear the red shirt today. I love red. Red is the color of strawberries, or whatever it is. You can kind of scaffold other language in that interaction and have them understand that that is red, that is a shirt, and they made that choice that they want to wear it. So giving them choices is really important. Or if I'm doing work activities, I might say, we're going to do a book and a puzzle. Which one do you want to do first? Or I might say, which one do you want to do last? Or if I'm working on articulation, I might, say a word. I might say like elephant. You say it. Your turn. Rather than, can you say elephant? So I'm directing them rather than asking them, can you do something? Because I want to avoid those yes/no questions. You do want to ask them, are you hurt? Are you hungry? You do want that yes/no answer. But if you actually want them to do something, then I would avoid them as much as possible.
Yeah, those are really good tips. Growing not growing up, when I was in college, and then when I started teaching, I did swim lessons. So one of the students that I taught, he was like 4 or 5 at the time, and he's 18 now, right? So it was a long time ago now. He might be even older than 18. But his mother was a speech pathologist also. And I know she worked with some of the children that I also taught swimming to. And sometimes she would, see them in passing, and I would see or hear the things that she does with them. And she was, really good at what she did. And you wouldn't necessarily think about doing that as a parent. It's like, say elephant, here's a flashcard, because no one tells you how to be a parent. No one tells you, even teachers, right? No one tells you necessarily how to be a teacher. The teaching effectiveness begins when you do cooperating teaching. Yes, a little bit happens in school, but like the theory stuff, like learning and everything, is all the science behind it. And then when you go into school, it's like you're tossed into the shark tank. You're like, okay, let's figure out what works and what doesn't work. And if you have a wonderful cooperating teacher, it makes the transition a lot better. And I think it's the same thing for having a therapist, a speech pathologist, parent coach, whoever on the same team as the parent. Because if that parent feels like, I'm going into this by myself, and, unfortunately, there's 40 something percent of 45%, maybe more now, I don't know, of parents that are going into parenthood by themselves. They're being single parents, single moms, single dads, and they don't have the dynamic of having the male and the woman counterpart in the household, where we get the emotion, maybe get the tough love from the father, the discipline. So it's like one person has to wear all the hats. And, we can talk about the effectiveness to single parents and how they're able to overcome. But then we can also talk on the other side of how it's more effective to have both parents in the household. And if you don't have both parents, you supplement it with a coach, with, teachers, things along those lines. They say it takes a tribe or a village to raise a child. It's not a like a solitary effort, even though parents feel like, the superpower, the superhero, like, I'm going to take on the world. I'm going to fight for my kid, and I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to give him the life that is, it's the best life, or the life that I never had, or something along those lines. And they realize that it's okay to delegate some of that to someone else. And, like for me, I understand, like, especially like when it comes to later on in life, when they're going into sports and martial arts and things like that, even though I have done it, even though I can teach him, I'm not going to do it, because I understand there's things dad can do and there's things dad can't do. And I remember there was a father. He was a wonderful father. He had 3 kids. He had 2 boys and a girl. And he came to me after one swim class, and he was like, Michael, do you think I don't know how to swim? And like, it was like $50 for half an hour with these kids, right? So it's very expensive, like swim lessons. He's like, Michael, do you think I don't know how to swim? And I'm like, I'm sure you know how to swim. I'd even say that he didn't know how to swim, but it's just that he wanted to make the point. There's things that I can't do, and there's things that I'm going to give someone else to do. And that opened my eyes to say, like, even how amazing you are as a parent, you have to ask for some help. And it's something that I think parents are afraid to ask. They're afraid to ask for help, and adults in general are just afraid to ask for help. Where do you think this stems from, that parents, or just adults in general, maybe if you want to, to go broad, are afraid to ask for help and to get a little bit of direction?
Yeah, I think it stems from the ego, whether they realize it or not. It's this ego of that they think that they're a failure if they can't do it all, right? Or if there's something, lacking in their parenting skills or their ability to teach something, that they think that it's a reflection on their ability to be a good parent. And they have this little bit of guilt, like, oh, well, my kid is fine because I'm trying my best. But they don't understand that if you just ask for a little bit of help from someone who specializes in that area, then you can get a little bit of a jump start and understand it better. Like I've had a lot of parents who, they're like, well, what can you do for my child that I can't do? And I said, well, I can get them to talk, but it's not to say that you can't, you just don't have those strategies yet. You need to have those strategies and that rapport and the way to teach your child how to be comfortable in practicing speech, how to practice their language, and how to communicate better. So it's not a diss on their parenting skills at all. And I feel that a lot of parents have to get over that ego part of it because, I'm a parent. I have ego as well. So, if they're telling me that my child can't do something, I'll be like, oh, well, is it my fault, that they can't do something? Or, is it me that is lacking as a parent that my child is unable to do this task? But, going back to, having a coach or somebody who's teaching or even a therapist even, parents are like, like a kid might be super well behaved and engaging during my session. And the parents are like, they're never like that at home. I'm like, because I am the teacher, right? I am the teacher, quote unquote teacher. And they just behave differently. They just interact with us differently because we are this figure of, not discipline so much, but we're a teacher, right? And I do the same thing for my son too. I know that he will behave better with a teacher or a coach than just with me. If I tell them, okay, we're going to do these exercises for your right hand or arm or whatever it is, he might be like, slouching or not participating and just making up all these excuses. But if there is a therapist, occupational therapist, or adaptive PE teacher, or somebody who's like specialized and they have that relationship with them, he's much more willing to participate. And, they have that rapport. And I've let go of my ego to be like, yes, please do that because I know that he'll benefit from it, So I can see it from both sides, being the therapist and also the parent in those situations.
Very true. You just have to be able to ask for help. You have to be able to open up and say that I don't know it all and that you only have 24 hours in a day. And even if you wanted to do everything, there's going to be some things that either you're not able to get to or things that are going to not be 100% efficient or effective. So that means it's important that you give that to someone who maybe loves that work, right? I'm sure you loved your work, right? Working with children, working with people, helping them become better speakers and things like that. And, again, the ego is so powerful. And, as a parent, yes, you might feel as if you have failed for that moment, but then understand that the victory is not only your own, it's your child's too. So when they're able to speak and when they're able to communicate better, understand that victory is yours too, because you understood that it's not only my endeavor, it's our endeavor. And we take away the singular now, right? So it's us as a team, right? We are working together versus, okay, I'm going to make sure I do everything for my child, my son, my daughter. And it's not so much I, it's about we. So I love to have wonderful coaches, professionals come on to talk about their work, to offer their services to anyone who might be in need, because I understand I can't do everything, just working with mindset alone. I can't do it. Plus, I'm not everyone's cup of tea because I'm a little bit more strict. So even though I know I'm very, fun on the podcast, when it comes to results and listen, if you want some change, you come talk to me. But it is more for the adults. It's not so much for the kids, even though I work with kids for quite a bit. So you do have to find the person that is for whatever situation that you're in. So if you need someone to work with your child, if you're an adult and you need something, you have to find the person for you. And that's why there's so many wonderful coaches, so many wonderful professionals that come on coaching in session, so they can be that beacon that you can look at and you can say, you know what, I want to reach out to them. I want to inquire about their services because I understand when I do it, a burden that was on me is going to be lifted. And it's almost miraculous that you can lean on someone and they're there to catch you. They're there to offer support. And it seems like in our world today, we don't get that. But when you're looking for help, when you're looking for a change, there are going to be people who are right there to give that to you. So as we begin to wrap up, Jeaneen, I would love for you to tell the audience where they can find you. And then also please share with us any final words.
Great. Yeah, you can find me at my website. It's called playdumbandsabotage.com. And you can, look at, there's links to my book. There's a free PDF download on how to implement playing dumb and sabotage in your daily life. And like simple things like if you have sabotage seems like a very destructive word, right? My mom was like, don't use that in the title. And I was like, I'm using it. So it's about creating situations where you can practice these opportunities for language. Very simple things like if you're having a snack, give the child just a couple pieces of snack, but have the rest of the bowl in sight but out of reach. So they need to ask for more or sign for more, indicate something that they want more, right? Or you might give a child, you might give them a toy, but maybe missing one of the parts that they need. So they need to ask for it, right? Indicate and sabotage a situation where they need to indicate that they are missing something or wanting something. Another thing could be like having a toy in sight but out of reach, maybe on a bookshelf that they are not going to try and climb up, but having it up there so they can actually try and indicate, oh, I need that. And then also, just when you're dressing a child, like I said, offer choices and things like that. I love also, doing a sing-songy voice. If you love music, because it incorporates the left side of the brain with language and the right side of the brain for music, blending those together really helps to solidify communication and helps them to remember, understand it, and express it better. So I think that having just a simple handout, if that's where you want to start out with your child, I think it's really important. And then I'll be posting this podcast on there as well. So there's lots of different strategies and resources they can access on my website, and then they can also contact me if they have any questions as well.
Any takeaways that you want parents to walk away with?
I think that, like you said, it's not a detriment to ask for help. It's really important. And, when we think about parenting, you can never imagine what parenting is going to be like, right? But we go through birth training, right? If you have a child, you go through birth training and what's going to happen when you're giving birth. And they teach you how to diaper the child, how to feed the child, and do that kind of stuff. And I think the lack of parent training is a huge reason why there is this need for speech therapy. So I think that, if we had more parent training on how to interact with your child, play with your child, communicate with your child, we can really make a difference in the early intervention and decrease the number of kids that need speech therapy. So if everybody could learn a little bit, it could make a huge impact.
Perfect. And I'll make it easy for everyone. All the links right down below. So check her out. Check out her website. The link for the book will also be there. And I am a huge advocate for tools for the toolbox. And basically, that just means you need to have an arsenal for so many different things. And you might have a toolbox in your garage. You have a screwdriver, you have a wrench, maybe you have a socket, maybe you have a drill, and you might not use those tools every single day. But when you do, you would like for them to be there. And the same thing is with being a parent, raising a child, right? You have to give yourself tools that you might have forgotten about, maybe tools that you knew nothing about, right? When I first moved into my home, right, I was living in an apartment and I just needed a hammer and a screwdriver. But when I started to have a bigger home, I said, I'm going to need a couple more tools. And as life progresses, we need more tools for that toolbox. So learning, knowledge, wisdom, all of those tools right there are going to be essential almost for every individual if they want to get the project or the end result to be somewhat of something that they can admire and be proud of. And I know the book that you have, Play Dumb and Sabotage, this could be a tool I'm going to be adding to my toolbox too, because it is so important, not only, as a parent, but, as a facilitator for working with other clients and they have children maybe too, I can definitely refer them to your book, refer them to you, because I understand I'm not everyone's cup of tea. And so I always try to help people find their cup so they can find that person that's going to be an asset in their corner. So I do want to thank you, Jeaneen, for coming on, spending a little bit of time with us and talking about your work today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael.